Hello and welcome to my May Book Unhaul. Yay. I have an overflowing unhaul shelf, so it was time to do one of these again. I don't think I've done one since January or February, and the shelf is it's not a very strong shelf, so I try not to leave too much on it. But I have a couple of books that I haven't read yet, and then I have a few that are older reads that I was kind of looking at on my shelf, like, I don't need to keep these. So I have a decently large stack, so I'm gonna get into them. Starting with over here. It's kind of like already expanded around me, so I have no idea what I'm doing. I have two Patricia Cornwell books. I have Postmortem, which is book 1, and then Chaos, which is book like 26 or some ridiculous nonsense. I love this edition of Postmortem. It's a mass market naked hardback with like the cover design printed directly on it. It's super cool. Like, they don't make books like this anymore. I didn't really love this book. I think I gave it 2 stars, but like very mediocre 2 stars. Like, it wasn't terrible, it wasn't great, but I held on to it because I really love this book, and I was like, if I wind up liking any of her other books, having her first book in a really cool edition would be awesome. And then I read Chaos, and Chaos was terrible. Like, I didn't like this, but my complaints about this were kind of like generic, mild, didn't love the writing, didn't love the characters, kind of boring. Set in my hometown, based on a murder in my hometown, which is a little bit like, I didn't like the way she wrote one of the victims directly into the story. It seemed kind of offensive. Didn't love it, but it also, like, fine cop thriller, I guess. This was unreadable. Would not recommend. I assume she has other better books. I assume this is just a bad one, but it was really bad and boring and nothing happened, and this whole book took place in like less than 24 hours, like mostly 12 hours, and it's a thick book. So regardless of how much I love this edition, they're both going. Then I have Last Call by Warren Adler, which I gave 1 star. It was terrible. This is a self-published book. Apparently Warren Adler is known for some things. Started self-publishing because he could. He wrote this might have been the last thing he wrote before he died. It's about an older couple. They meet, they fall in love, and then it turns out that the woman actually still has a living husband who has dementia and kind of the issues with that, but then it winds up just being a lot about anti-Semitism and how she's Jewish, and the dude in the romance partnership is incredibly anti-Semitic and like yells a bunch of anti-Semitic slurs at her, and it's a romance novel, so like they're gonna wind up together, but I really didn't want them to, and she deserved so much better. And it was just like, you can't save a relationship after he yells anti-Semitic slurs at her. You can't do that. So this was awful. I also hated the writing. I hated everything about this. I'm just focusing on that because that was like the final straw for me, but like I hated the relationship. I hated the romance. It was so fast. Like, there was no development in their relationship. Like, they didn't earn it. I wasn't invested in it, and like I had such high expectations, and this wound up being so bad, and I was really, really disappointed, and I don't know. It's unfortunate. They Do It with Mirrors by Agatha Christie. Not my least favorite of her books, but I found that I'm not really an Agatha Christie person. I'm gonna get through the ones on my shelf and then probably unhaul them all. I just found it kind of mediocre and unimpressive, and I don't know, not really an Agatha Christie fan, so I don't need to hold on to this. Even though I really love these vintage editions, I found them in thrift stores and they're super cool, but like, unfortunately, I just don't like them. I have 2 Gillian Flynn books, Dark Places and Sharp Objects. I collected all of her books at a point. I read Gone Girl. I really loved Gone Girl. I'm keeping Gone Girl. I reread it and I think it holds up. And I know it's not like a popular book to enjoy anymore, but like, I think it's really, really enjoyable. Like, not the greatest thing in existence, but like, I've read it 2 or 3 times now, and I really think it's like worth it. But I had collected both of her other books. She has a 4th one now that I never read, but I was like, oh, like, I really like that one, so I should have all of her books, and I read these, and both these were fine. I think I gave Sharp Objects 3 stars and Dark Places 4 stars, but to be honest, I have not thought about them since I read them. Like, I'm never going to reread them. I thought they were decent thrillers, but like, I don't tend to go back to thrillers frequently. There are a couple I really love. Gone Girl is one of them, but like, I have no desire to read her most recent book, which might be a novella. I think it's called The Grown Up. I just don't really have much of a desire to go to that one. And I there's no reason for me to keep both of these on my shelf. Like, I read them once. I'm glad I read them. I don't think they were bad books, but like, I don't know. I don't really keep many thrillers. Like, I keep the thrillers that I really loved and the authors I really love. And despite my love for Gone Girl, I thought she was an author I really loved, but I think I just really love one of her books. So these will go to a better home. In much the same vein, Girls Like Us by Christina Dalcher. This is a thriller about, I don't even remember, an FBI agent who goes home and after her father's death, and then she starts investigating like a sex trafficking ring that might be linked to the police and maybe her father, and she kind of starts figuring out like, is he the person I thought he was? Like, who is he? Like, what's going on here? There's bad things happening, and it was fine. Like, it wasn't a bad book. It was just one of those books that I read and like will never ever think about again. Like, not bad, just so forgettable. So I will unhaul this. I'm pretty sure I picked this up from the same little free library that I'm going to leave it at. But yeah. The Midnight Disease by Alice W. Flaherty. This is a nonfiction book about writer's block and also hypergraphia, I think is what it's called. I read it years ago. It's more about like the brain and how the brain functions than it is about like writer's block itself from like a theoretical standpoint. It's very much, and it's more about hypergraphia, if that's what it's called. Like when you write too much, like when you're just like incessantly writing. It was largely about that. And I just didn't get anything out of this. I think I got this for a writing course that I took in college. I read it cover to cover. Probably some very interesting things in it, but like, I'm pretty sure it was more medical, almost. Again, it's been years since I read it, but I was looking at it on my shelf like, why did I keep this? Like, why do I still have this? I'm never gonna go back to this. I haven't thought about this in a long time. I only think about it when I see it on my shelf like, huh, that wasn't very good. I didn't really enjoy that, so like, why do I have it? Like, I keep writing books as resources even if I didn't love them, but like, I'm not gonna go back. I don't know. I didn't get much out of this. I don't necessarily think it's bad. I don't even remember it very much. It's been so long since I read it, like probably like 8 years or something ridiculous, but I just, not my thing. Not gonna, I don't know. I don't need this. Code Talker by Joseph Bruchac. This is a middle grade historical fiction book about the Navajo talkers during World War II. Essentially, this is a true thing. Navajos became code talkers because the code was based on the Navajo language. So there were a lot of Navajos in the Marines. Very interesting subject, and he did tons of research for this book, but this book was like 90% research, 10% story, and I feel like he needed some more rewrites to actually turn this into a story, because it was mostly just like research and information and like a very generic main character with a very generic story. Like, it would have taken less editing to turn the main character of this book into a different character than it would have taken to actually make him fully developed. And he said in the author's note, he basically admitted to that and was like, yeah, like this book was all research, and then I kind of figured the story would come out eventually. And I feel like he just never got to the story. Like, I think this was worthwhile because I got a lot of information from it. Like, his research was great. I just wound up wishing this would be like a young adult, middle grade nonfiction book instead of historical fiction. Domestic Pleasures by Beth Gutcheon. This is a contemporary, it's written in the 90s. It's basically about this couple, and this woman falls in love with her dead ex-husband's divorce lawyer who basically wrecked her life, and then it's kind of an ensemble about like everyone who's even remotely connected to them. I just unimpressed by this. I didn't like any of the characters. They were all so annoying and unlikable, and it wasn't really the kind of book where they were supposed to be unlikable, or where like you could get through with them being unlikable. They were all just annoying, and it was so purposeless without liking them. Like, there was nothing to this. It contributed nothing. All of them were terrible parents. Like, you should know where your child is at 3 o'clock in the morning when they're like 15 years old. And it's wild that like all 8 of these parents had no idea what their children were doing at any point and largely didn't care. Yeah, this was unfortunate. I really love Still Missing by her. Like, it was so good and so interesting and like such a well-crafted story. And this was kind of just like a bleh on the page. I didn't really like it. As Against You by Fredrik Backman. I did not enjoy Beartown. This is the sequel to Beartown. I thought I was going to love Beartown, so I went ahead and bought this book because I saw it in a thrift store before I read Beartown, because I was just convinced that I was going to fall in love with that book. And then I read it and was so unimpressed. Like, I didn't hate it. I think I gave it 3 stars, but it was like a low, borderline 2, you know, like that kind of 3 stars of like, it's barely achieving mediocrity. And I had this on my shelf and I was like, well, I'm gonna read it anyway. And then years went by. I've still not read it. And to be honest, I don't remember Beartown anymore. Like, it's been so long. I'm clearly not going to read this book I didn't like so that I can read the sequel. I just don't need it. Like, I don't need this book. This book contributes nothing to me. I'm not gonna read it. I've held on to it for so long, and I think I was just in denial about the fact that I was never gonna read it. So I'm not going to read it. I'm going to take it to a local free library, and hopefully someone who really loved Beartown will find this and enjoy it. Women Who Love Men Who Kill by Sheila Isenberg. This was worthless. This is true crime written in like 91. It was shallow and bland and condescending and awful in basically every capacity, and had a bunch of like pop psychologists who were just like peddling their own books, going off on like whatever their like beliefs were that they're selling, and like making a bunch of diagnoses on these women that they've clearly never met. And oh, it treated the women in this book so badly. Like, it was so sexist, and like written by a woman, still sexist. Got a lot of internalized misogyny there. I don't know why I got this and expected it to be good, because it's like exactly what it looks like it's going to be. It's a really interesting subject, and I truthfully do not really disagree with a lot of what she said. Like, it's kind of generic and bland, and like, these women are damaged and looking for love, and they're protected in a way because their husband is in prison, because, you know, they've been in a lot of physically abusive relationships, and it's like, because he's in prison, he can't hurt her as easily, and like, it gives them more power. And it's like a lot of things like that like, yes, that is an interesting theory, but like, you actually have to write a book that like delves into stuff and doesn't just like repeat, these women are damaged, these women are damaged, these women are damaged over and over and over again, which is basically what this did. And it was also just like super repetitive. Like, it went on and on about like the same things constantly. Wasn't really a fan. Not the worst thing I've ever read, but like, it was such a waste of time. I always feel bad putting this back out into the world, because I feel like someone else is just gonna waste their time with it. But like, that's fine. Maybe they'll like it. The Lying Game by Ruth Ware. This was fine. This was mediocre. Ruth Ware is so like mediocre to me. Like, I probably enjoyed this. No, I enjoyed this the same as the first one I read. They were both 3 stars, and not like good, interesting 3 stars, but like fine 3 stars. Like, they're not bad. They're not really good either. They're just not bad, and they add nothing. I don't think about them. Like, I don't even remember what this one was about. Lying? Probably. It was like a group of friends who like lied when they were kids about something dumb, and they should have come clean, and they never came clean, and it wasn't really a crime to begin with, so why is everyone freaking out? And then there was a murder, so I don't know. I was unimpressed. Vox by Christina Dalcher. I happened across her Twitter one day, and apparently she really hates trans people, so I was like, I don't need to read this book. I've got too much on my TBR, so away she goes. Out of the Dark by Natasha Cooper. This is a British thriller. the main character was a lawyer. There was a boy who was hit by a car, and they were like investigating who his parents were, and then I don't remember it. Honestly, like, I remember nothing about this, so I have nothing to say, but it's like, I'm clearly not gonna hold on to this. I don't remember anything about it. A Thin Dark Line by Tami Hoag, which is another mediocre thriller. I like reading thrillers. I'm very picky with thrillers, so a lot of them tend to be very mediocre, but I do like reading them. I do tend to just immediately unhaul them, though. I don't keep a lot of thrillers, so maybe someone else will enjoy this. It was interesting and dense, but like written in the 90s and very, very prejudiced in a lot of different ways, so not really a fan, but maybe someone else will enjoy it. Driven by Dane Cobain. To be honest, I wasn't gonna get rid of this at first because he's another booktuber. I really like his channel. This book wasn't bad. Like, it was fine. I enjoyed it. It was kind of like a 3-star enjoyment of like, yeah, it was a good time. I'm not gonna think about it again. It was a fun mystery. But then I kind of figured, like, it's not doing any good sitting on my shelf, and like, someone else might enjoy it a lot more than me, so I'll put it in the little free library and maybe they'll discover Dane and really like his books, because I do feel like there's an audience for these. Like, much like Agatha Christie, I don't think this is my thing, but I think other people will like mysteries like this, so hopefully someone else will find his books and enjoy them. The Likeness by Tana French. This book, the premise of this book is that she goes undercover as a murder victim because she looks like the murder victim. I can't get past that. Like, I can't get past that. It doesn't make sense. Outside of a fantasy setting, like, this is a realistic contemporary book. Like, in a fantasy setting, sure, maybe. In a realistic book, no. You can't go live with her roommates who have been her best friends for years and think you're going to trick them just because you look kind of like her. Like, I can't buy into that, which is so disappointing because I really liked the characters and like the writing. It was a really dense, interesting thriller. It's just, I could not get past that premise. I do want to read more Tana French. I have not liked the two that I read so far. I read this and In the Woods, I think it was called. I really like them. In theory, there's just always something aspect that ruins them for me. So I feel like she's got one out there that I will love. It just wasn't this one. If you like dense thrillers and you can get past the premise that she just goes undercover as a murder victim for weeks and it works, I would recommend this because it was really well written. It's just like, you cannot go undercover. If someone who looked like my boyfriend showed up and pretended to be him, I would know. Like, you can't do that. It doesn't work. Like, I couldn't get past the premise, but well written. I think I give it 3 stars, and like, that's pretty much just a testament to how good this book was, that it got 3 stars after the premise. A Prayer for Owen Meany by Irving. I talked about this a lot in the vlog where I was reading it for 3 weeks straight, and it was just such a slog. Honestly, in hindsight, I like it a lot better. It's one of those books that, like, now that I'm not actively reading it, I only remember the good things, and I don't remember the fact that it was so painful to pick up, and I spent 3 straight weeks reading this book. Like, every day I was reading this book, and it took me 3 weeks to get through. But it's like, now that it's been a minute, I'm just thinking, like, oh yeah, like, the political commentary was really interesting. I really loved the Vietnam setting. I really liked, you know, I don't know, a lot of things about it, but like, it was so painful to get through. Like, I'm never gonna reread this. It was just like pure suffering, but like, it was interesting. Like, I think now that I'm not reading it, I understand why people like it, but I just didn't. I couldn't. America Back on Track by Edward Kennedy. I was big on the Kennedys when I was a teenager. Like, I was a weird kid. And not like I was a fan of their politics. I just found them a very interesting group of people. So I read a lot about them. And I picked up his book when I was a teenager. You know, it's been more than 10 years. This, I think, is set. I mean, not set. I think it's written about, like, the early aughts. And it's like, I don't care about Teddy Kennedy's thoughts on politics in the early 2000s. Like, this is in no way relevant. Like, I haven't read this book. I'm not going to get anything out of this. Like, I still have books about him and his life, and I have, like, his autobiography, which I might read at some point, but, like, I'm not going to get anything out of this, like, 20-year-old outdated book by a politician who's dead, whose politics I didn't even agree with that much. Like, I don't know. So I'm just gonna unhaul it, because, like, there's no reason for this to sit on my shelf forever. The Secret History by Donna Tartt. Truthfully, I think I kept this more because I enjoyed The Goldfinch than because I enjoyed this book. I don't remember this book, like, at all. Like, I know I read it. I read the whole thing. I didn't dislike it. I gave it either 3 or 4 stars. I don't remember it. Like, a single thing about it. I can't even begin to tell you anything about it. Like, genuinely, this book is a huge blank for me. But, like, I really enjoyed the first half of The Goldfinch, and I don't own The Goldfinch, so I think I kind of instinctively held on to this to have one of her books. But, like, if I saw The Goldfinch, I would not get it. Like, if I saw it for free in a little free library, I would leave it there. Because I'm not going to reread it. I didn't like the second half. And it's just like, why am I holding on to this book that I have not thought about since I finished it, that I can't even begin to describe or tell you my thoughts on? Like, why is this wasting space on my shelf when it could go to someone else's shelf and waste space there? Or, like, be enjoyed by them, you know? One of the two. So I'm gonna take this to a little free library. I feel like someone might be happy to find this, but, like, I genuinely don't remember a single thing. And then the last book is The End of the Twins by Saul. I DNF this. This is his memoir about the death of his brother from leukemia. His twin brother. Like, they were kind of estranged, and then he was diagnosed with leukemia, and they kind of, I don't know, it's about his death. I got like 100 pages in, maybe. It was so boring. Like, it was so dull. Like, I had to go back and reread so much because it just did not stay in my brain. It was like I was reading this, like, trying to connect, trying to feel something, trying to just, like, remember what he was talking about, and it was just, like, in one ear, out the other, gone. And I was having such a bad time, and I just was not going to spend a month reading this decently short book about this dude whose brother died because I did not care. And I feel so bad because this book had no reviews on Goodreads until I reviewed it, and it was a DNF review, and, like, I feel terrible. And this dude is dead, so, like, I feel kind of worse, but also better that, like, I'm not just trashing this dude's book to his face. But yeah, it's not, I don't know, I wouldn't even say it's bad. Like, my feelings towards it are not bad. It was just so dull that I couldn't focus on it enough to, like, understand what he was saying. Like, it was just, my brain could not, like, grasp the words. I tried really hard because I soft DNF this years ago, and then I tried, like, end of last year, I think, to read it again, and it was a blank. It's so unfortunate. But yeah, that's the end of the unhaul. Everything I'm getting rid of. I don't know. Let me know down below if you've read any of these, what you thought of them, if I should change my mind about the, like, 3 that I haven't read, but I'm not going to, so, like, why bother? I don't know when I'm getting rid of these, because truthfully, I have still not gotten rid of the books from my last unhaul, which was, like, February. They're still sitting in a box in my car waiting to be taken to a little free library, and I just have not bothered because I'm lazy. But I don't know. Talk to me down below if you've read any of these, if you have thoughts on any of these, if you want to read any of these. I don't know. As always, thank you so much for watching, and I will see y'all again soon.